She was bullied for being poor. Until her twin sister showed up, shocking. An emotional story by Heartfelt Tales. The cafeteria fell silent as Madison watched her lunch tray crash to the floor, spaghetti sauce splattering across her worn sneakers like crimson paint. Above her stood Jessica Hartwell, the queen bee of Riverside High, her designer heels grinding a meatball into the linoleum as she smirked down at the girl everyone called Charity Case Chen. But what Jessica didn't know was that at that very moment, 15 minutes across town in a gleaming corporate boardroom, Madison's identical twin sister Victoria was closing a deal worth more than Jessica's father made in a year. And Victoria Chen Morrison, CEO of Morrison Tech Industries, was about to discover that someone had been tormenting the most important person in her world. If you're already hooked by this incredible story of sisterly love and revenge, drop a comment below and don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more amazing stories that will touch your soul. Madison had always been the unlucky twin. Born 23 minutes after Victoria, she seemed to inherit all the misfortune that fate had originally intended for both sisters. When their parents died in a car accident 12 years ago, the twins were separated through a cruel twist of bureaucracy. Victoria, who happened to be at a friend's house during the social services visit, was placed with the wealthy Morrison family who had been seeking to adopt. Madison, found at their modest apartment, was shuffled into the overwhelmed foster system. The Morrison family, believing they were adopting an only child, gave Victoria every advantage money could buy. Private schools, tutors, violin lessons, summer camps in Switzerland. Victoria thrived, her natural intelligence blossoming under careful cultivation. She graduated valedictorian from Princeton at 19, earned her MBA from Harvard at 21, and through a combination of brilliance, determination, and strategic thinking, had maneuvered herself into the CEO position at Morrison Tech Industries by age 24, making her the youngest female CEO in the company's history. Madison, meanwhile, had bounced between 7 foster homes in 12 years. Each placement brought new challenges, new disappointments. She was currently living with the Hendersons, a kind but financially struggling family who had taken in 4 foster children. They did their best, but there wasn't money for new clothes, school supplies, or the 1,000 little things that separated the haves from the have-nots at Riverside High. The twins had lost contact years ago, but fate had kept them in the same city. Victoria, busy building her empire, had no idea her sister was struggling just miles away. Madison, ashamed of her circumstances, had never tried to reach out to the successful Morrison family she'd read about in local newspapers, not knowing that the Victoria Chen Morrison making headlines was her own flesh and blood. The bullying had started small, as it always does. Snide comments about Madison's thrift store clothes, deliberate exclusion from group projects, accidental shoulder bumps in the hallway. But Jessica Hartwell, whose father owned several car dealerships and whose mother sat on every charity board in town, had elevated cruelty to an art form. She seemed to take personal offense at Madison's existence, as if poverty was a choice Madison had made to spite her. "Look what you've done, you clumsy freak," Jessica sneered, her voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. "Those shoes probably cost more to clean than your entire outfit." Her friends giggled, their laughter sharp and cutting. Madison knelt to clean up the mess, her face burning with humiliation, when she felt gentle hands helping her. "Hey, leave her alone," said Marcus Rivera, a quiet boy from Madison's chemistry class. He handed her napkins, his dark eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. "The janitor's coming. Don't worry about it." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Oh, how sweet. The scholarship loser has found another charity case to play with." She turned to the growing crowd of onlookers. "Did you guys know that Madison here gets free lunch? My dad always says we shouldn't enable people who don't contribute to society." Something inside Madison snapped. Not from anger, but from a deep, bone-tired weariness. She had endured so much, survived so much, and this girl who had been handed everything was telling her she didn't deserve basic dignity. At least I know the value of what I have, Madison said quietly, standing up with as much dignity as she could muster. And at least I know how to earn respect instead of buying it. The cafeteria gasped. No one had ever talked back to Jessica Hartwell. Jessica's face flushed red, and her next words dripped with venom. You want to see what real power looks like? I'll make sure you regret ever speaking to me. My father knows everyone in this town, including the foster services. One phone call from him, and you'll be shipped off to some group home across the state. How's that for earning respect? Madison felt the blood drain from her face. Jessica wasn't making empty threats. The Hartwell family really did have that kind of influence. She gathered her backpack and fled the cafeteria, Jessica's triumphant laughter echoing behind her. That afternoon, Madison found herself at the public library, her refuge when home felt too crowded and school felt too cruel. She was researching colleges with good financial aid programs when she decided to look up successful businesswomen for inspiration. She typed "youngest female CEO" into the search bar, hoping to find stories of people who had overcome difficult circumstances. The first result made her heart stop. There, smiling confidently from the cover of Business Weekly magazine, was a face identical to her own. Victoria Chen Morrison, CEO of Morrison Tech Industries, dubbed the Wunderkind of Silicon Valley by Forbes. Madison clicked through article after article, her hands shaking. The same eyes, the same smile, even the same small scar on the left eyebrow from when they'd fallen off their bikes as children. With trembling fingers, Madison found Victoria's corporate email and began typing the most important message of her life. She poured out everything: the separation, the foster homes, the bullying, the threats. She attached a photo of herself and hit send before she could lose her nerve. Victoria was in the middle of a board meeting when her assistant knocked urgently. "Ms. Chen Morrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this email immediately. It's about your family." Victoria's hands shook as she read Madison's message. The photo was like looking in a mirror, but more than that, she remembered. She remembered Madison's laugh, the way she always chose cherry popsicles while Victoria chose grape, how they used to practice their twin telepathy before bedtime. The scar they both carried, earned during a dare that had gone wrong when they were 6. "Cancel my meetings," Victoria said, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Cancel everything for the rest of the week." The next morning, Madison walked into school unaware that her life was about to change forever. Jessica was waiting by her locker with 3 friends, clearly planning another humiliation. But before Jessica could speak, the school intercom crackled to life. "Madison Chen, please report to the principal's office immediately." Madison Chen to the principal's office. Jessica smirked. "Guess Daddy Hartwell's phone call worked faster than I thought." But her smile faded when Madison emerged from the principal's office 20 minutes later with a woman who looked exactly like her, but dressed in an expensive black business suit and designer heels that clicked with authority against the linoleum floor. Victoria had spent the previous evening planning. She'd contacted the school, the Henderson family, and most importantly, she'd made some phone calls about the Hartwell family's business practices. What she'd discovered had been very interesting indeed. "Madison, sweetheart," Victoria said loudly enough for Jessica and her friends to hear, "I'm so sorry it took me this long to find you. But I'm here now, and no one will ever hurt you again." Jessica's face went white as she realized who she was looking at. The resemblance was unmistakable, and Jessica's father had just last week been trying to secure a contract with Morrison Tech Industries. Victoria turned to face Jessica with a smile that could have frozen fire. "You must be Jessica Hartwell. I've heard so much about you. In fact, I had a very interesting conversation with my legal team about you this morning. Did you know that threatening foster children is considered harassment under state law? And that schools can be held liable if they don't protect vulnerable students?" Jessica stammered, I never, she's lying." "Oh, I don't think she's lying," Victoria continued, her voice silk over steel. "You see, I also had an interesting conversation with the state education board about Riverside High's anti-bullying policies. And with the local newspaper about doing a feature story on how the children of prominent families treat their less fortunate classmates. I think it would make fascinating reading, don't you? The color had completely drained from Jessica's face. You can't, my father. Your father, whose car dealerships are currently under investigation for predatory lending practices? The same father who owes Morrison Tech Industries a rather substantial sum for the software systems we installed last year? Victoria's smile never wavered. I think your father has bigger problems to worry about than protecting his daughter's right to torture foster children. Madison watched in amazement as Jessica Hartwell, the terror of Riverside High, seemed to shrink before her eyes. Other students had gathered to watch, and Madison could hear whispers of, "Is that really her sister?" and "Madison has a twin who's a CEO?" But Victoria wasn't finished. She turned to address the growing crowd of students. I want everyone here to understand something. My sister Madison is one of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever known. While I was given every advantage, she faced challenges that would have broken most adults. She's survived, she's thrived, and she's maintained her kindness and dignity through it all. Anyone who thinks less of her because she doesn't have designer clothes or the latest phone is someone whose opinion isn't worth having. She placed her arm around Madison's shoulders. And anyone who thinks they can hurt her now will discover that she has someone who owns more companies, employs more people, and has more influence than they could ever dream of. But more importantly, she has someone who loves her unconditionally and will move heaven and earth to protect her. The next few weeks transformed Madison's life completely. Victoria didn't just make threats, she followed through with action that created lasting change. She established a substantial anti-bullying fund at Riverside High, funding counselors and programs to support vulnerable students. She also quietly ensured that Madison's foster family, the Hendersons, received college scholarships for all their children and a mysterious grant that allowed them to buy a larger house. But the most important change was personal. Victoria legally adopted Madison as her sister, giving her the Chin Morrison name and all the security that came with it. They spent hours catching up on 12 lost years, sharing memories and dreams, rebuilding the bond that had been severed by circumstance but never truly broken. Jessica Hartwell became a different person almost overnight. The investigation into her father's business practices resulted in significant fines and a humbling, very public apology. Jessica, faced with the reality that her family's reputation was now in ruins, finally understood how her words and actions had affected others. She approached Madison 3 weeks later, her eyes red with genuine tears. "Madison, I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I was angry about things in my own life, and I took it out on you because I thought you couldn't fight back. That was wrong, and cruel, and I hate who I was." She paused, struggling for words. "I don't expect us to be friends, but I want you to know that I'll spend the rest of high school making sure no one else gets treated the way I treated you." Madison looked at this girl who had caused her so much pain and saw something she recognized. Someone who was lost and afraid, lashing out because she didn't know how else to cope. "Jessica, I forgive you. But more importantly, I hope you can forgive yourself and choose to be better." Marcus Rivera, who had been the only one to help Madison that day in the cafeteria, became her closest friend and eventually something more. Victoria hired him as a summer intern at Morrison Tech Industries, recognizing in him the same quiet strength and integrity she saw in her sister. At graduation, Madison gave the valedictorian speech, her voice strong and clear as she addressed her classmates. "We all face moments when we feel powerless, when it seems like the world is stacked against us. I want you to know that those moments don't define you, how you respond to them does. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places, sometimes we have to create our own opportunities, and sometimes we discover that the family we need has been there all along, waiting for the right moment to find us." Victoria, sitting in the front row with tears streaming down her face, knew that she hadn't saved Madison that day in the school hallway. Madison had saved herself long before Victoria arrived. Victoria had simply been privileged to witness her sister's incredible strength and to provide the support that allowed that strength to flourish. Years later, when Madison graduated from Stanford with honors and started her own nonprofit organization helping foster children, she would always remember that day in the cafeteria not as the moment she was humiliated, but as the moment she stood up for herself and set in motion the events that brought her sister back into her life. The twins learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be diminished by others' cruelty. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to reach out, you discover that you're not as alone as you thought. Love, like truth, has a way of revealing itself when we need it most. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below about overcoming adversity and the power of family bonds. Your story might inspire someone else who's facing difficult times. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales for more incredible stories about resilience, love, and the strength of the human spirit. Ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, because every story we share has the power to change someone's day or even their life. Until next time, remember that your circumstances don't define you, but your courage to rise above them always will.